I represent engineering. We are one of three departments that are on our committee. The other two departments are operations and member services. Our committee is chaired by Sherman Leemantynen, who is the District 9 representative from Cloquet. Also on our committee is Carter Pedersen, who's the District 4 representative from Grand Rapids, and George Harvey, who's the District 3 representative from Britt and Side Lake. And I can tell you that our department has benefited greatly by that committee involvement. That increased communication and participation with the board has helped us achieve our goals that otherwise, without that involvement, I don't believe we would have been able to achieve last year. What I'd like to do next is cover just a quick snapshot of some of the major projects we did last year. You'll be happy to hear that I'm not going to go into detail on each one of the substation projects, but I did want to touch base with you a little bit about what the benefit of those substation projects are to you as members in terms of cost savings and providing you with reliable service. The reason that we do substations and we have so many substation projects here is because we do an economic analysis when we have a voltage problem or a loading problem. We look and see, should we reconductor, should we do a voltage conversion, or should we do a new substation? Now, if we were to replace all of the feeders associated with a substation, that's about a $15 million project. A substation is about a $1.1 million investment. So anytime you look at those and you have a tenth of the feeders that you need to replace or more, it can become more cost effective to put a substation in place. But there's also some significant other benefits that you get as members when we do put a substation into service. One would be greater reliability. For those of you that live in between two substations, we now have two sources of power available to serve you. Another would be that I'm going to talk a little bit later about aged infrastructure, but when we have smaller, older conductor, we're able to extend the life of that. So we're replacing conductor based on age when it's actually end of life, rather than having to replace it based on load alone. So we're getting more bang for that initial investment that you've put into that system. Another benefit would be we don't want to have to be in a position like some other utilities have been where we have to deny members availability to our programs. So with a substation, we have the capacity available to you to meet any of your requests for dual fuel, off-peak, any of the other special programs that we have that are very worthwhile and beneficial to the membership. We don't want to be in a position where we can't offer those, and we aren't in that position, I can say today, and that's a good thing. The next I want to touch base with Spruce Service Project. You might have heard about that. It's kind of an interesting one. You may have read about it in the local papers or seen it on TV. It's a $300 million project that's taking place about 40 miles north of Grand Rapids in Marcel area. It's being conducted by the U.S. Department of Energy, USDA, and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And what that is they're testing the effects of global warming, and they're raising the temperature 9 degrees Celsius and looking at increased concentrations of carbon dioxide to see what the effects on the local ecosystem are. We had to do a line extension to serve that. It was kind of an interesting project this year. Some of the other major projects that we're doing I've listed down here at the bottom. One is Winton, we're rebuilding, which is east of Ely. We're rebuilding about 7 miles of aged line. Crane Lake, we have about 5 miles of line we're rebuilding on the east side of Crane Lake. And Fraser Bay is between our new substation in Fraser Bay and Cook. We have about 8 miles. And this is another point I can maybe illustrate a little bit. One of the good benefits of us being members of GRE is the 8 miles of line, because they're rebuilding transmission through there, we're able to take advantage of that, and they will rebuild our line at the same time for less than a third of the cost. That would have costed the membership over $1 million to replace that aged infrastructure, but because of the benefit we have of being partners with GRE, we're able to do that for less than $300,000. So that's a very nice benefit to have as being members of GRE. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about underground services. All the utilities have put in underground cable in that 70s vintage, 70s, early 80s. When cable was manufactured in that time period, manufacturers weren't necessarily as aware about the impacts of impurities and how that caused cable failure. We have about 400 miles of cable that we need to replace, and we do about 15 miles of that a year. Of course, it's better for us to do that proactively when we can schedule it than reactively when we have an outage, and that's a cost savings to the membership as well. Next, I'd like to talk about right-of-way and what the benefit that is to the membership. What we do for our right-of-way program, we do what's called an integrative vegetation management system. What that means is we break our system up into blocks per year group. So we have between, if we do a 6-year cycle, we have 6 blocks where we touch the system once every 6 years, and we integrate spray and mowing. And the primary purpose of IVM is to make sure that we are providing low cost and reliable service through our vegetation management program. We can see the effects of that. When we look at a storm, if you look on Outage Viewer, you can see where we've been through and cleared the trees. There'll be very few outages, but you can also see where we need to get to the right-of-way because there'll be several more outages. You can see it. It's very evident to those of us that know where we've been on the system. We set aside $2.25 million every year to do our IVM program. But we also set aside $400,000 for what we call mid-cycle work. And that's in that 6-year period. If we're going to touch every area in 6 years, between years 2 and 5, we will make sure that we have some money set aside for areas that have higher than normal growth. In this area, we're looking at like Big Sandy, Sturgeon Lake. If you go up to the northern division, you'll see Lake Vermilion, Tower, Ely are typically on that list. There we need to go back and do some clearing to keep those on track. We also set aside $300,000 for member requests. So you as members can say, I've got some trees that look like they might impact my reliability. You can give us a call and we'll be happy to come out there and remove those trees for you. So that's another great benefit of being a co-op member. Just to give you some rough budgetary numbers, what we spend on right-of-way. 2010 we spent about $3 million. 2011 we spent $2.45, and this year we're back up to about $2.95 million on the right-of-way program. And hopefully some of you got a chance to talk to Seaver Colden this morning. He's our right-of-way coordinator. And he's done an excellent job of getting us from a 10-year cycle down to that 6 or 7-year cycle. The benefit of that is that it reduces our cost and it greatly increases reliability. And some proof of that I can give you is we use what's called a threshold. It's called SAIDI. It's basically how long would the average member be out if we took all of our outage time and divided it by every member on the system. If you look at the statistics from 2005, the average member would have been out of power for 29.7 minutes. So almost 30 minutes of power every member would have been out. If you look at that statistic today in 2011, it's 9.9. So we've basically cut that down by 2/3. We're at about a third of the outage time that we would have had just in a matter of 7 years. Pretty remarkable statistic, I think, and it's a testament to the commitment of the board and their vision to make sure their commitment to the right-of-way program. It's a testament to Seaver's ability to manage that program and to Lake State's construction to be able to implement that and provide that significant increase in reliability to the membership. I talked a little bit about spraying. I'd like to maybe take just a minute here to explain why spraying is so valuable to our right-of-way program. Spraying, when we spray, we can spray our area for about $1,400 a mile. If we have to mow and trim instead of spray and trim, that cost goes up to about $4,000 a mile. So it's about a 35% reduction in cost when we spray. So if you take that $3 million budget I talked about earlier, if we didn't have any spraying and we just did mowing, that would be $9 million. That would be a $6 million rate impact on all of us. So it's a very important part of us being able to cost effectively provide those reliability gains that I just talked about, getting that down to that 10-minute outage for membership from 30 minutes. So there are a couple of things that you can do as members if you have some concerns about spraying. If you don't want us to spray in a certain area, you can put signage up that can say, please do not spray. We'd be happy to honor those. Just please remember, we are not the only entity that sprays. The county also sprays. There's also several other entities that do spray, and so we're one of many. But we also send a card out when we come through the area, and you can fill that out, let us know where you'd like us to spray. You can also call the number on that card, and any of our staff would be happy to talk to you and discuss specifically on your property where you have spraying concerns. Finally, I'd like to talk about some of the engineering challenges we have in terms of aged infrastructure. What I'm showing here, this is a map of all 8,200 miles of line, and you can see there's a lot of red on that. The red are areas that we've identified that need attention over the next 20 to 30 year time period. Those are areas that have number 8 copper, number 6 copper, number 4 ACSR only, those 3 predominant conductors. And what I'm talking about there, this is number 8. So when we put this up in the 30s, 40s, it was adequate for cabins that had a light load, just a few lights and lightly loaded. Today, what we're putting up to meet the heating loads and the increased loads of today is much significantly larger. So what we have is we have this line being old because of loading, but also when we look at the system, there's 2 components we look at for the age of the distribution system. One is poles. We typically can get 60 to 75 years out of the pole. We can get about 90 years out of the conductor. So a good number that most utilities use is 80-year life. With 8,200 miles of line, that means we have to do 100 miles of line a year. Now, we are at that point, we're starting to see where our infrastructure is reaching that 80-year life. Stuff that we purchased that was built in the 30s was 80 years in 2010. Stuff that we put in the late 30s, early 40s is going to be 80 years in 2020. So we're at that point now where we need to start looking at 100 miles of line a year, and how do we roll that in the most cost-effective manner without burdening the membership with rate pressure. So we're trying to take a very proactive look at that, because if we do it proactively, we can save about half the cost if we do it reactively. If we actually schedule the work and go out there and change the pole and line, it costs us half as much as if we have to reactively go out there, change poles, and then change line later. So it's something that we're taking a real hard look at. We have 1,100 miles of that number 8 copper that I showed you, that small stuff, another 1,100 miles of number 6, which isn't much bigger, and about 300 miles of steel conductor. Those are our 3 main big targets for over the next 20 years, but I can assure you we're taking a very hard look at that to minimize the impact and only make those changes where it makes sense. I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and I'll be available after the meeting if you have any questions. Thank you.